Another job that needs to be done. The car that's been standing for 40 years, 1965 122S overdrive, its charging system doesn't work. I don't know if it's the control box or the dynamo. They tend to be unreliable, I find. They get fried because of the proximity of the bearings to that exhaust manifold. It's very short of space down there. You cut your hands trying to adjust the belt, and people often leave the bolts at the bottom undone, and then the dynamo casing wears out. I'm not a fan of them. Neither were Volvo, because they changed over to an alternator around about 67 or so. This is a left-hand drive car with an alternator fitted, without the steering box in the way. There's plenty of room. The alternator is wider, it's shorter though, so it doesn't get fried, and this works out absolutely fine, no problems at all. The alternators mount in an extremely simple manner, just one big bolt at the bottom. This one's a little bit shorter than it should be, it's just a temporary, and that bolts straight into the engine block on a left-hand drive. Tighten it up, that's it. The one at the top is for the adjusting rod. Again, very simple. So just two bolts, and you can either remove the alternator or adjust the belt. Very, very simple. Right. On a left-hand drive car, the engine block has a rather meatier section where the dynamo was, and the alternator bolt goes straight into it. There is a threaded hole here. Alternator goes into that big half-inch UNC hole, no problems, easy. Right-hand drive cars, the alternator was supplied on the left-hand side of the engine. Now, this is fairly simple. The bolt for the adjusting rod, that goes into the head, all cars have that. The snag is the bottom mounting. There is a separate extra bracket bolted onto the engine block, and it contains the thread for the alternator mounting bolt to go into. Two nice strong 3/8 UNC threaded holes are provided for the bracket to bolt into. Very, very strong, very, very rarely fail. However, on an early car like this 1965, the engine block does not have those fittings. So the snag is, how are you going to fit your Volvo bracket, or how are you just going to fit the alternator, full stop? On this car, right, a large single bracket has been fitted onto just one of the bolts in the timing cover. This alternator is, it's reasonably secure, but I worry about that single quarter-inch bolt having to hold on to the alternator. I think it might suffer. Right, the very nice people at Amazon Cars supply a bespoke bracket with longer bolts that you fix to the timing cover, and then you have this big hole for the alternator mounting bolt to go through. That works. It's 5mm thick. It's going to work absolutely fine. Only downside is that you're not going to have the ease of maintenance, because there has to be a nut and bolt going through the alternator. Now, this may work or may not work. I think it'll be okay. But I've had a go at making my own mounting bracket. What I've done instead is I've got my fixings onto 3 of the timing cover bolts. Then I've made a substantial bracket behind, which extends from the front, and then I can actually bolt my original Volvo bracket onto it. So the whole thing will go on like that, and I will then be able to bolt my alternator on as per factory original. I'll give it a try, see if it works. It's just a little experiment that I'm going to try out. Right, did take quite a lot of fiddling around with the welder, but we will go and see what we can do. You may have noticed that there are some variety in these alternators. This is a Bosch one, with its Bosch control unit. There are also SEV Motorola units, but I don't seem to have one to hand at the moment. They both fit in exactly the same way, but I think the control units are different. Now, there is a third one, which are the newly manufactured units which come from Taiwan or Vietnam or somewhere like that. You can get them from Brookhouse. This is a modern alternator. This one came with the abandoned for 40 years car, and I'm hoping it's going to work. This car got an early production version of one of these alternators, and it has never missed a beat. It's absolutely fine, so no issues with that. Notice no control box anymore, which is a convenience, I must say. And I say I've had no issues with this whatsoever. So next job will be to untangle the mess of wiring on the 65, get the dynamo off, get the dynamo belt off because it's too short. The alternator uses a 980mm bolt, 980mm belt, so you need a longer one. And then see if with one of those alternator brackets I can fit an alternator on here and get it all working. So everything you wanted to know about Volvo Amazon alternators, and indeed the 140 series and PV and 1800, they're all the same. So onwards, forwards.